He stood at the kitchen island at 7 in the morning, already in his dress shirt, already making calls. Randall never did anything halfway. That was what I'd told myself when we met. That was what I'd told my sister when she raised an eyebrow at the engagement. He's driven, I said. He's focused. He knows what he wants. I was right about that last part. I just didn't understand what he wanted.
If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. That Saturday morning, I had been up since 5:30. The roasted red pepper crostini were done and covered in the fridge. The good china was already stacked on the dining room sideboard. I'd ironed the linen tablecloth the night before, which sounds excessive for a dinner party but was not excessive if you knew Randall. Randall noticed everything. The off-center centerpiece, the salad fork pointing the wrong direction, the way I said something slightly too casual to a business associate. He noticed and he cataloged and he brought things back up later, quietly, in private. In that voice he used that made you feel like you'd failed a test you didn't know you were taking. We'd been married for just over 2 years. We lived in a 4-bedroom house outside of Nashville. Cream-colored siding, black shutters, a double-car garage, the kind of house that looked like a Christmas card. I'd moved there from Indianapolis with my daughter Jade after the divorce from her father when she was 13. She was 15 now and she had adjusted, more or less, which had taken longer than I wanted to admit. Jade was not a dramatic kid. She didn't sulk or slam doors. She watched. She listened. She absorbed. I sometimes thought she was the most perceptive person I'd ever met, including adults. I'd made the mistake, like a lot of mothers do, of confusing quiet with okay. Randall's business dinner was for 6 guests, 3 partners from a firm in Atlanta he was courting for a capital investment, their wives, and 1 attorney whose name I could never remember. They were arriving at 6:30. This meant I had approximately 11 and a half hours to finish the appetizers, prep the main course, set the table, get myself dressed, brief Jade on how to make polite small talk with people twice her age, and most importantly, be pleasant, warm, lovely, the kind of wife that made a man look successful just by standing next to him. That last item was not on any written list. It never was. It was just understood. I was sliding the second tray of crostini into the refrigerator when Randall came off his call and walked into the kitchen. He was in charcoal gray slacks and a pale blue dress shirt with the top button open, sleeves rolled to the elbow. He looked at the counter, did a quick visual inventory, and seemed to decide everything was acceptable. "Good," he said. "That cheese, the Gruyere. Make sure it's room temperature before they arrive. Cold cheese tastes like nothing." "I know," I said. "I've done this before." He gave me a look that was almost a smile. Not quite. "I want the Bordeaux opened by 6, not 6:15. 6. I've got it." He picked up his phone again. The Bordeaux conversation was over. I went back to my list. From upstairs, I could hear Jade's music just barely. She kept it low, always had. I thought about going up to check on her, but Randall's eyes were still in the room even when Randall wasn't, if you know what I mean. I stayed at the counter and started on the salad dressing. Here's what I knew about our life that morning. The house was beautiful. The pantry was full. There was a joint account with a healthy balance and a car in my name. And Jade's school was excellent, and her therapist said she was doing well. Here's what I told myself. This was stability. This was what I'd wanted for her after years of instability. Here's what I was choosing not to look at. The way Randall spoke to me when no one was listening. The way Jade never relaxed when he was in the room. The way I had slowly, over 2 years, stopped calling my friends as much, stopped making plans without checking first, started ironing tablecloths at 10 o'clock at night because it was easier than explaining why I hadn't. I was finishing the vinaigrette when Jade appeared in the kitchen doorway. She was in jeans and a gray sweatshirt, hair pulled back. She looked at me. She looked at the hallway. She stepped in. "Mom," she said quietly, "I need to show you something." Her face was the color of old paper. "Not right now," I said, "because that is what you say when you have a party in 11 hours and your hands smell like Dijon mustard. We can talk after I finish the dressing." There's a lot to do today. Mom. Something in the way she said it made me put the whisk down. She walked to me, not quickly, carefully, like she was trying not to make noise. And she pressed a piece of paper into my hand, folded small. The kind of small you fold something when you don't want anyone to know you're carrying it. I opened it. 5 words, in Jade's handwriting. She has small, careful printing, always has. The kind of handwriting that looks like she's thinking about each letter before she makes it. I read it twice. I looked at her. She shook her head just once, and her eyes said, "Not here, not out loud. Please just trust me. Now listen." My first reaction, and I am not proud of this, but I'm being honest, was irritation. It was 7:45 in the morning. I had Randall's business partners arriving in less than 11 hours. I had a roast to prep and a table to set, and I did not have space in my brain for whatever teenage crisis was unfolding. That is a terrible thing to admit, but I was living inside a very carefully maintained performance, and that performance required that I not look too hard at things I didn't want to see. So I kept my voice low and I said, "Jade, is this a joke? This?" She looked at me steadily. "No, I don't have time for this today." "I know," she said. "That's why I'm telling you now." There were footsteps in the hallway. Both of us went still. Randall walked in before I could say another word. He did what he always did when he entered a room. A quick scan, almost unconscious, taking inventory of who was where and what was happening. His eyes went to Jade first, then to me, then to my hand. I closed my fingers around the note. "What's going on?" he said. It wasn't really a question. "Nothing," I said. "Jade was just telling me she needs help finding her history textbook before the guests arrive." His eyes moved to Jade. She said nothing, which was the right call. Randall did not like being read. Blank was always safer than emotional. He glanced at his watch. "The guests are arriving at 6:30. I need you focused today, Lorraine." "I'm focused." "You were standing there doing nothing." "I was listening to my daughter." He made a sound, not quite dismissive, not quite anything, and went to the coffee maker. The conversation was over as far as he was concerned. I looked at Jade. She looked at me. I made the smallest tilt of my head toward the hallway, and she understood. She disappeared. I finished the vinaigrette, washed my hands, told Randall I was going upstairs to check that the guest bathroom had fresh towels, and I went. Jade was in her room. Door closed. When I stepped inside, she locked it behind me. She looked pale and very calm, the way people look when they've had a whole night to get past the panic and into something steadier and colder. I sat on the edge of her bed. "Tell me," I said. "2 nights ago," she said. "Thursday." She sat down across from me in her desk chair, hands folded between her knees. I woke up around 2 in the morning and I was thirsty, so I went downstairs for water. His office light was on. The door wasn't all the way closed. I could hear him talking. "On the phone," I said. "Yes." He wasn't loud. That was the thing. He was just talking like it was nothing, like a grocery list. She stopped, steadied herself. "He said your name, Mom. He said everything was set for Saturday. He said you always have your evening tea and that it would look like a cardiac event. He said clean. That was the word he used. And then he laughed. I didn't say anything. He said once the payout cleared, he'd have enough to keep the company breathing for another 18 months. She continued. He said something about a policy, $1 million policy. "The life insurance," I said. My voice sounded like it was coming from somewhere else. "The one he had me sign 8 months ago. He said it was estate planning." I remember sitting at the kitchen table with that notary public and Randall explaining about protecting our assets, and I remember thinking how responsible it was, how thoughtful. Jade nodded. She reached into the pocket of her sweatshirt and pulled out her phone. She opened the Photos app and turned the screen toward me. When he got off the call, she said, he went to his desk and pulled out some papers. He was in there for another 20 minutes. When he finally went to bed, I went in and looked. I stared at the screen. It was a bank statement, photographed in the low blue light of a desk lamp, a little blurry, but legible enough to see the account name, the transfer amounts, and the destination account labeled only with a series of numbers. "He's been moving money for 7 months," Jade said. "Not to the business accounts, to something else. It's your inheritance, Mom, from Grandma and Grandpa's property sale." I had been sitting on the edge of her bed. I realized I was now gripping the comforter with both hands. "The amount that's been transferred," Jade said quietly. I added it up. "It's about $240,000. I let go of the comforter. My hands were shaking. "Jade," I said, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. Are you absolutely certain about what you heard?" She looked at me with those calm, serious eyes. "Mom." I know what I heard. I believed her. I had believed her since she put that note in my hand 40 minutes ago, underneath everything, even while I was telling myself it couldn't be real. I'd believed her because Jade did not catastrophize. Jade observed. Jade measured twice. She did not come to me with things she wasn't sure about. He planned to kill me at his own dinner party. I sat with that for 10 seconds. Then I stood up. Here's how we left the house. I went back downstairs and found Randall in the dining room, reviewing his notes for the evening. I put my hand to my forehead. I said, "Randall, I am so sorry. I feel a migraine starting. I don't know if it's the stress of this week or what, but it came on fast." He looked at me. I said, "I'm going to run to Walgreens and get my prescription refill before you need me here. I'll be back within the hour. Jade can come with me in case I need help driving if it gets worse." He was quiet for 4 full seconds. I counted. His voice, when it came, was careful. "You were fine this morning." "I know," I said. "It just hit me. You know how they come on." He knew. I had migraines genuinely about twice a year. He'd seen them. He had that to work with. "Be back in an hour," he said. "Of course," I said. "I want to be here when the guests arrive." I smiled at him. He held my eyes for 1 more second, and then he looked back at his notes. I walked to the stairs, got Jade, got my purse and my keys, and we walked out the front door at a pace that was measured and normal and cost me more effort than I have ever spent on anything in my life. I did not look back. We got in the car. I backed out of the driveway. I drove to the end of the street, turned the corner, went 1 more block, and then I pulled into the parking lot of a dry cleaner that wasn't open yet on Saturdays, and I put the car in park. "Drive," said Jade. "Away from here." "I know," I said. "Give me 1 second." My hands were shaking so badly I had to put them flat on my thighs. "We are not going back," Jade said. "I know," I said again. But even then, I wasn't sure that was true. We sat in that parking lot for 22 minutes. I know because I kept looking at the dashboard clock. Not because time mattered, but because I needed something concrete to focus on while the world rearranged itself. Jade went through everything she knew, slowly, the way she'd clearly been rehearsing since 2 in the morning on Thursday. She'd been carrying this for 2 days. 2 days. My 15-year-old daughter had been walking around this house for 2 days, knowing what she knew, eating dinner at the same table as the man who said those words, sleeping under the same roof, looking at me and not being able to say anything because she needed to find the right moment, needed to get it right, needed to make sure I would believe her and act. I thought about that, and something cracked open in my chest that I haven't been able to fully close since. Here's what we laid out. The life insurance policy. $1 million taken out 8 months ago, naming Randall as sole beneficiary. His idea. His notary, actually, now that I thought about it. His attorney. His company, Meridian Group, which I now understood was in serious trouble. I had seen the stress of it. The late calls, the closed-door conversations, the sharp mood shifts over the past 8 or 9 months. I'd attributed them to the pressures of growth. That was what he'd told me. Growing pains, he called it. We're scaling too fast. It's manageable. $240,000 moved from the account that held my parents' estate proceeds, transferred in chunks over 7 months, never a round number, never a pattern that would trigger a bank alert, methodical, patient, and digoxin. I didn't know that word yet, but I'd know it soon enough. What I knew in that parking lot was poison in your tea, and that the tea I made every single evening, the chamomile I brewed at 7:30 like clockwork, was sitting in a ceramic pot on my kitchen counter right now, possibly already doctored, while Randall's guests sipped Bordeaux in my dining room. "Okay," I said finally. "Okay, what?" Jade asked. "Okay, here's what we're not going to do. We're not going to disappear. We have no money he doesn't control. My personal account has about $4,000 in it, and my credit cards are on his accounts. If we run without proof, he will file reports. He'll say I had a breakdown. He'll say I took Jade. He has a city councilman in his back pocket named Dwight something. I've met him twice at events. Randall has lawyers who owe him favors. And I have a history of anxiety, documented, medicated, which he has been, I now realized, very carefully encouraging me to keep on record. I had been being set up for much longer than Thursday night. "So we need proof," Jade said. "We need proof," I agreed. I looked at the clock. Randall had guests arriving in about 10 hours. The house would be full of people. If there was something in that tea, it was in the house right now. And I did something that I still can't fully explain except as the particular kind of calm that arrives when you've gone past scared. I started the car. Before I put it in drive, Jade grabbed my arm. "Mom," she said, "I know what you're going to say. You can't go back in there. I'm not going in to stay," I said. "I'm going in to get one thing." She stared at me. "Think about it," I said. "If we call the police from this parking lot right now and we tell them what you heard, what do we have? A teenager who overheard a phone call, a blurry photo of a bank document. No police officer in Nashville is going to walk up to Randall Cooper's front door on a Saturday morning based on that. He's a businessman. He has a reputation. He has friends who are friends with people who are friends with judges, Jade. And I am not being paranoid. I have sat at dinners with these people." She was quiet. "But if there's something in that tea," I said, "that's physical evidence. That's the kind of thing a lab can test, and a prosecutor can use and a jury can understand." Her jaw was tight. "You could also end up drinking it by accident." "I'm not going to drink the tea, Jade. How are you going to get it out of the house without him noticing?" I thought for a moment. He's going to be occupied. The guests are arriving in 10 hours. He's in preparation mode. He doesn't go in the kitchen once the catering prep is done. He considers it below him. I'll go in the side door, straight to the kitchen, take the pot, and leave. It will take 4 minutes. She looked at me for a long time. "I'll park 2 streets over and wait," she said finally. "You have 10 minutes. If you're not back in 10 minutes, I'm calling 911. "Done," I said. I turned back toward the house. What I didn't tell Jade, what I only admitted to myself much later, was that going back wasn't entirely logical. Part of it was fury. Part of it was the particular thing that happens when you've been small and careful and managed for years inside a life that was not what you thought it was. Part of me needed to walk back through that door on my own terms. Just once. Just that once. I came in through the side door off the garage. The alarm beeped twice. I'd punched in the code so many times my fingers knew it without my brain engaging. Randall was in the dining room. I could hear him on the phone, that low, controlled voice. The kitchen was empty. The ceramic pot, small, cream-colored, with a little painted sprig of lavender on the side that I'd bought at a market in Chattanooga 2 years ago, was sitting on the counter near the stovetop. I had prepped the chamomile bags that morning before any of this happened, sometime between the crostini and the vinaigrette. Just automatic, just routine. I looked at it. I got a dish towel from the second drawer. I wrapped the pot carefully, set it inside my tote bag, zipped it, and picked up my purse. I was turning to leave when I heard footsteps. Not from the dining room, from the back hallway. I put my hand on the counter, set my face, casual, unhurried. Cressida walked in. Cressida Barlow was Randall's executive assistant. She'd worked for him for 4 years. She was somewhere in her late 30s, bright, efficient, always slightly overprepared, the kind of person who showed up to meetings 10 minutes early with color-coded folders. I'd always liked her, vaguely. We'd had exactly 2 real conversations in 2 years, both at company events, both pleasant enough. She looked at me, and then she looked at my tote bag, and then she looked at me again. "Lorraine," she said. Her voice was low. "I'm so glad you came back. I've been trying to figure out how to reach you. I kept my face neutral. You have?" She glanced toward the hallway. She stepped closer, which I did not love. She said, "I know something's wrong. I've known for a few months. I couldn't say anything because—" She stopped. "Because I needed to protect my job. But I can't keep quiet anymore." "What do you mean?" I said. She reached into the inner pocket of her blazer. She pulled out a small USB drive. Silver, the kind you can buy at any office supply store for $4. "Everything's on here," she said. "Financial records, account transfers, communications between Randall and the insurance broker, the fake audit reports, all of it." I looked at the drive. Everything in me wanted to take it and run. Here's the thing about being desperate. When someone hands you what looks like exactly what you need at exactly the moment you need it, you don't ask the right questions. I'd like to say I was suspicious. I'd like to say some part of me registered the convenience of it, but I was operating on adrenaline and 2 hours of panic, and that drive looked like salvation, and I am human. I took it. "Thank you," I said. She nodded. "Get out of here," she said quietly. "Don't let him know I gave you that." I walked out the side door and got back in the car in 4 minutes and 50 seconds. Jade was parked 2 streets over in the Kroger parking lot, sitting in the passenger seat of a stranger's angle view of the street, watching. When I pulled in next to her, she exhaled so hard it fogged the window. I got in the back seat of her car. I'd handed her the keys, easier that way, and I set the tote bag carefully on the seat beside me. "I got the pot," I said. She looked at it through the fabric of the bag like she could see it. "Okay, what do we do with it? I need to get it somewhere safe, somewhere he can't get to it." We found a motel called the Cloverleaf about 3 miles east on Route 41. Cash payment. I had $200 in my wallet from a grocery run I'd done Tuesday, plus $60 in my coat pocket from a refund I'd forgotten about. We checked in under my maiden name, which isn't something that would fool anyone for long, but bought us a few hours. Jade stayed in the room with the tote bag. I told her, "Do not open the pot. Do not move the pot. Do not let anyone in this room who isn't me." I drove to the nearest Walgreens, genuinely this time, and bought a water testing kit, which I knew even as I was buying it was essentially useless for what I needed, but I was not thinking clearly, and I needed to feel like I was doing something. I also bought 2 prepaid phones. I tried the non-emergency police line from the new phone. I explained, as calmly as I could, that I believed my husband had placed a toxic substance in a beverage in our home, with the intent to kill me. I said I had a witness and physical evidence. The woman on the line was polite. She said she'd connect me with a detective. I was on hold for 11 minutes and then the call dropped. I tried again. Different officer. He asked me a series of questions in a measured tone and then told me I should come into the station with my evidence, that they couldn't initiate anything without a formal complaint in person. I looked at the USB drive sitting in my cup holder. I still thought I was ahead. "Hos?" There was a FedEx office off the interstate about a mile from the motel. I borrowed a laptop at the print station, paid $3 for 30 minutes of time, and I plugged in the drive. It took a moment to load. I watched the little spinning icon, and I thought, for about 45 seconds, that I was about to have everything I needed. One folder, one file inside it, audio. I put in the earbuds I always carry in my purse, and I pressed play. It was my voice. I recognized the conversation immediately. It was from about 6 weeks ago, a fight Randall and I'd had in the kitchen about the inheritance money. I'd been asking questions, not because I knew anything then, just because the numbers weren't adding up in my head. I'd been upset. I'd said things in a raised voice. I'd said at one point something like, "If you think I'm just going to let this go, you don't know me very well." In the original conversation, that statement was about the money transfers I was asking about. In the recording on the drive, with about 15 seconds of audio removed from before and after, it sounded like something else entirely. It sounded like a threat. I sat at the FedEx office print station for 2 full minutes without moving. He'd had Cressida plan it. She wasn't a reluctant ally with a conscience. She was his, and had always been his. And the fact that she'd handed me that drive so smoothly, with just the right amount of nerves and sincerity, meant that Randall had suspected I knew something and had prepared for it. If I'd handed that audio file to the police before they heard my side, it would have destroyed my credibility before I even started. I ejected the drive. I dropped it in the trash can next to the print station. I sat there, trying to stay calm, and I tried to figure out what I had left. A blurry photo of a bank statement, Jade's testimony, and a teapot in a motel room that I had no way to test without a forensic lab. I needed a lawyer, not just any lawyer. I called the motel room from the prepaid phone before I started the car. Jade picked up on the first ring. "I'm fine," I said. "Don't worry. I'll be back in 20 minutes. Don't open the door." She said, "Okay." And then she said, "Mom, the pot. What about it?" I stepped out to the vending machine. I was only gone for maybe 6 minutes. When I came back, the tote bag had been moved. It was sitting on the other bed. I left it on the desk. I went still. She said, "The pot is gone. The dish towel is still there. Just the towel." I leaned my forehead against the steering wheel. He had someone watching the house, which meant he'd seen me go in and come out with the bag. Or Cressida had called him the second I walked out the side door. Either way, someone had followed me to the cloverleaf, waited for the room to be empty for 6 minutes, and walked in. The motel locks were the old card swipe type that any determined person with the right equipment could open in under a minute. The teapot was gone. The one piece of physical evidence that could have gone directly to a lab was gone. I called Jade back. "Pack everything up," I said. "We're changing locations." I drove back to get her, and the whole way there I was trying not to panic, trying to think, trying to remember what I knew and who I could call and what options remained. There was one person. I hadn't talked to her in almost a year, which was entirely because Randall found reasons to comment, subtly and persistently whenever I spent time with her. In retrospect, that was its own kind of information. I found her number in my old phone, the regular one, and I dialed. "Francine," I said when she answered. "I need your help. I need it today." Francine Okafor had been my divorce attorney when I left Jade's father. She was thorough, direct, and had zero patience for nonsense of any kind. She was also, underneath all of that, genuinely kind, which is rarer in lawyers than you'd hope. She'd met Randall twice. At my wedding, briefly, and once at a dinner I'd hosted in the first year. She'd been polite to him. She'd been quiet. Afterward, she'd said to me, in the parking lot while we waited for the valet, "He seems very charming." Just that. The pause before the word charming did a lot of work, and I had ignored it completely. She listened to me now without interrupting, which is one of her great skills. I talked for almost 10 minutes straight, sitting in the FedEx parking lot with Jade now in the passenger seat beside me. When I finished, there was a brief silence. Then Francine said, "I owe you an apology." "What?" "When you told me about the life insurance policy 8 months ago, you mentioned it in passing when we talked about your estate paperwork. I had a feeling. I ran a quiet background check on Randall. Nothing official. Just a contact I have." I stared at the windshield. "You did?" "His first wife, Lorraine. Her name was Rosalind Mercer Claiborne before she married him. She died of a cardiac event 3 years ago. She was 44 years old, healthy as far as anyone knew, no prior heart issues. The death was ruled natural, but there was a note in the file. From an ER physician who'd treated her 6 weeks before her death for what looked like a medication reaction, flagging it for follow-up. The follow-up never happened. I think the world moved. I have the report, Francine said. And I have a contact at the county district attorney's office who I have been meaning to call about this for 8 months and did not because I told myself I was being paranoid. And I will live with that for a long time. Can you call him today? I asked. She said, I'm already dialing. His name was Daryl Fontaine. He was a DA investigator, mid-50s, and he answered Francine's call on a Saturday afternoon in October, which told me something about the kind of person he was. He met us at a Panera Bread off the interstate because it was public and had parking, and he wanted us somewhere visible and calm. He had a yellow legal pad and a voice recorder, and he sat across from Jade and me, and he listened to everything. He asked questions that were specific and careful, and he wrote things down in a handwriting so small I couldn't read it from across the table. When we finished, he turned to Jade. He said, I want to make sure I have this right. You heard this conversation on Thursday night at approximately 2 a.m, and the words you heard specifically were, and Jade went through it again. Every word, calmly, in order. She'd been through it so many times in her head that it came out cleanly, without drama, just the facts of what she'd heard in that doorway. Daryl wrote it down. Then he said, the photograph of the bank statement. Jade pulled out her phone. He looked at it for a long time. He asked if he could send it to himself. She said yes. He looked at Francine. He said, we've had a file open on Randall Cooper for 18 months. It's related to Rosalind Claiborne Cooper's death. It's been slow because we didn't have a living witness who could speak to his behavior. You have one now, Francine said. Yes, he said, we have 2. He looked at the legal pad. He said he needed to make some calls. He said we should stay at a different location than the Cloverleaf. He'd get us a place. He said we should not contact Randall, not respond to texts or calls, and not go back to the house. He looked at me. He said, you did the right thing leaving when you did. I didn't say what I was thinking, which was, I almost didn't. I almost stood in that kitchen and wasted this whole morning arguing with myself. I said, what happens next? He said, first, I'm going to make sure the right people know what you've told me. Then I'm going to get a warrant. The text started at 2 p.m. The first one was normal sounding. Guests are asking about you. When are you back? The second one, 40 minutes later. Call me. The third one, Lorraine. I don't know what you're doing, but you need to come home. Then a gap of about an hour. Then, I've filed a missing persons report for Jade. The police will need to speak with you. I showed Daryl. He was not surprised. He said Randall was trying to flush us out and to create a paper trail that made me look unstable and volatile. The missing persons report would generate a record of Jade being missing, which could then be used in a family court proceeding to question my fitness as a parent. Daryl said, he's done this before. The other wife's family tried to raise concerns after her death and found themselves tangled in a harassment counterclaim that cost them 2 years and their legal savings. He does this, I said. Turns the machinery around. Daryl nodded. It works until it doesn't, he said. There was a family court preliminary hearing scheduled for Monday morning. Randall had moved fast. He'd clearly had an attorney already briefed and waiting. Francine filed a counter motion within 2 hours. I had to give a formal affidavit about the specific threats Jade had witnessed. Jade had to give one too. That night, Jade and I stayed in a motel that Daryl arranged. A different one, better locks, second floor. We ordered delivery. We watched something on my phone that neither of us could tell you the plot of afterward. At some point, Jade fell asleep with her head on my shoulder, and I sat there in the dark and thought about the ceramic pot with the sprig of lavender and where it was now and whether any of this was going to hold. I thought about Rosalind Claiborne Cooper, 44 years old, no prior heart issues. I thought she didn't have a jade. They went to the house Monday morning. Daryl told me afterward. 2 detectives and a uniformed officer, warrant in hand. Randall answered the door in his bathrobe, which I found oddly satisfying. I'd never seen him answer a door in his bathrobe in 2 years of marriage. He was always dressed. That was the first thing that slipped. He was calm, Daryl said. Very calm. Asked to see the warrant. Read it carefully. Cooperated fully. That kind of calm, Daryl added, is its own thing to see. They searched the kitchen first. They found the ceramic pot. My ceramic pot, the one that had been taken from the motel, sitting in a paper grocery bag in the back corner of the garage behind a box of motor oil and a folded tarp. He'd kept it. I have no explanation for that. Maybe he was going to dispose of it later. Maybe he hadn't gotten to it yet. Maybe some part of him was so confident that none of this would get this far that he hadn't thought it through. The pot still had residue in it. They also found, in the back of a kitchen cabinet behind a box of oat bran. It was always the oat bran cabinets, apparently. That's where people hide things in kitchens. Daryl told me this like it was common knowledge. A small, unlabeled amber glass bottle, about the size of an eye drop bottle. It contained a liquid. The lab results came back 48 hours later. Digoxin. Derived from foxglove, used in cardiac medications in controlled doses. In the wrong dose, it causes arrhythmia and cardiac arrest, colorless, tasteless. When Daryl explained all of this to me over the phone on a Wednesday afternoon, I was sitting in a plastic chair in Francine's office, and I just kept nodding and nodding like that was a thing my body needed to do. My doctor confirmed I had no prescription for digoxin, had never had one, had no cardiac condition that would require it. Randall was arrested at 9:17 on Monday morning. Francine called me 4 minutes after it happened. I didn't cry. I thought I would. I just sat very still and breathed. Then I looked at Jade and I said, "It's done. He's in custody." She put her face in her hands for about 30 seconds. Then she looked up and said, "Can we get real food? I am so tired of motel continental breakfast." And I laughed, which was maybe the first real laugh I'd had in 4 days, and we went and got real food. In the weeks after the arrest, everything came apart in the way that things do when someone has been constructing a fiction for years and the construction finally stops. Meridian Group was 4 months from filing for bankruptcy. Not growing pains, not scaling challenges. The company had been hemorrhaging money from a bad commercial real estate investment for over 2 years, and Randall had been quietly moving personal assets into protected accounts while the company sank. The $240,000 from my parents' estate were gone, distributed across 3 accounts, 2 of which were in the names of Shell LLCs registered in Delaware that a forensic accountant found within a week of getting access to the records. The life insurance policy was confirmed, $1 million, sole beneficiary him. Signed 8 months ago at a notary appointment he had arranged with an attorney who, it turned out, had handled Rosalind's estate as well. And Rosalind. Her case was formally reopened within 10 days of Randall's arrest. The ER physician who'd flagged her medication reaction 3 years ago was located. Retired now, living in Chattanooga, and, it turned out, had been waiting for someone to call for 3 years. He'd submitted a supplemental report to the original examiner and never heard back. Rosalind's family, a sister in Memphis and a brother in Charlotte, came forward and gave statements. They'd always believed something was wrong. They'd had an attorney look into it briefly and been buried in counterclaims until they ran out of money to continue. Her body was exhumed. The toxicology results took 3 weeks and came back as a quiet, awful confirmation. Traces of digoxin in the tissue, the same compound, the same method. I had been wife number 2. I sat with that for a long time. I don't have a way to adequately describe what it feels like to understand that the thing that was done to you was done before, to someone else, and that person didn't make it out. It's not relief, exactly, though there is relief, and it is real, and I will not pretend otherwise. It's more like a long, sober accounting of luck. Rosalind didn't have a daughter who stayed up too late and heard the wrong phone call. I had Jade. That was the only variable. That was the whole difference. I didn't know Rosalind. I looked her up. She was a high school art teacher. She coached the track team. Her students planted a garden in the courtyard of her school in her memory. Her sister's name is Renata, and she called me once in the middle of all of it, and we talked for 40 minutes and cried, and I told her I was going to be there when the verdict came down, and I was. The trial took 11 days. I testified on day 4. Jade testified on day 6. Francine testified on day 8. The ER physician from Chattanooga testified on day 9. Calmly and thoroughly, and without a single crack under cross-examination. Cressida Barlow to her credit, and I give her limited credit for this because she let it go on a long time before her conscience caught up with her, took a plea deal and testified against Randall on day 7. She confirmed that he had instructed her to plant the USB drive. She confirmed that she had been aware of financial irregularities for over a year. She confirmed that he had, in her presence, referred to Lorraine's insurance policy as the exit. The exit. That was the word he used, not my name, the exit. The jury was out for less than a day. Guilty on attempted murder in the first degree. Guilty on 3 counts of financial fraud. Guilty on 2 counts of unlawful asset transfer. Guilty on 1 count of witness tampering related to the Cressida situation. Randall stood up when the verdict was read. He was wearing a dark suit, of course he was, and his face was composed. He turned and looked at me across the courtroom, and I will not pretend that didn't require something from me to hold steady under. But I did hold steady. I looked back. I did not look away. He was sentenced to 32 years, with the murder charge in Rosalind's case still pending. It came down to the prosecution building their timeline of premeditation, which, given that the method was identical, they felt confident about. The likelihood of parole was approximately 0. Renata was sitting 2 rows behind me. When the sentence was read, she made a sound that was not crying exactly. I turned around and took her hand, and we just sat like that for a minute while the courtroom noise swelled around us. Francine, on my other side, said nothing. She just put her hand on my shoulder. That was enough. The house sold in 11 days. We got a fair price, not everything it was worth, because the legal proceedings had complicated the title for a while, and buyers know when a property has a story. But fair. With that and the restitution settlement from the liquidation of Randall's remaining business assets, Jade and I landed in a 2-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood east of Nashville, where the streets have old trees and the neighbors wave when you take out the trash. It is not a 4-bedroom house with a double-car garage and black shutters. It does not look like a Christmas card. I love it completely. Jade's room faces east. She gets the morning light, which she says she hates. She's not a morning person, never has been. But I catch her sitting in the window with her coffee sometimes on the weekends, just looking out at the street. She does not look like a kid who's been through what she's been through. She looks like a kid who's been through what she's been through and come out the other side of it knowing something about herself. She's applied to 5 colleges. She wants to study psychology. She told me this at the kitchen table one night over takeout Thai, casually. Like it wasn't the most clarifying thing I'd heard in months. She said, "I want to understand how people get trapped in situations they can't see clearly." She paused. She said, "I think I have some personal research experience." I laughed until my eyes watered. So did she. Francine comes for dinner once a month now. She brought a bottle of good wine the first time and has continued that tradition, which I fully support. She and Jade have developed their own friendship, independent of me, which involves a lot of discussion about true crime podcasts and the inherent flaws in the American civil court system. I find this deeply funny and also deeply right. Those two deserve each other. Renata and I text. Not often. We're both still finding our footing, but we're in each other's lives now in a way that feels permanent. She sent me a photo last month of the garden her sister's students planted at the school. Chamomile and lavender, because those were Rosalind's favorites. I kept that photo. I look at it sometimes, not to feel sad, to feel like something was witnessed. 3 months out from the verdict, Randall's murder charge in Rosalind's case came through as a formal indictment. Francine called me on a Tuesday morning, her voice doing that thing it does when she's trying to be professional and is also very pleased. The prosecution's timeline was solid. The toxicology was definitive. The ER physician's testimony was going to carry. She said, "He will not see the outside of a prison in his lifetime." I sat with my coffee and the morning light, and I let that land. There is a small wooden box on my nightstand. It has a brass latch and a water stain on one corner from when I knocked a glass over early in the spring and didn't notice for a few minutes. Inside, it is a piece of paper, folded small. I do not unfold it very often anymore. I know what it says. I've known what it says since a Saturday morning in October when my 15-year-old daughter pressed it into my palm in a kitchen that smelled like Dijon mustard and freshly cut herbs, with guests coming in 11 hours and a man in the next room who was counting on me not to look too closely at anything. 5 words. I have started keeping a journal since all of this, not about Randall, about the part that came after, about what it looks like to rebuild something, not back to what it was, but forward into something different, something with your eyes open. I write in the mornings when the light is good and the apartment is quiet and Jade's alarm hasn't gone off yet. I have learned one thing with a clarity I did not have before all of this. The warning signs were there. They were always there. The way he controlled the temperature of every room without raising his voice. The way he made me feel accountable for things I hadn't done. The way I stopped calling people I loved because it was easier than the conversation that followed. The way Jade never relaxed when he walked in. I had a daughter who was paying attention when I wasn't. I will spend the rest of my life being grateful for that, and also making sure, in every conversation I have, every room I walk into, every relationship I enter, that I am also paying attention. That I do not talk myself out of what I can see. That is the whole lesson. That is all of it. He thought I wouldn't find out. He thought that if I did, he had enough machinery in place to bury it. He thought a perfectly pressed shirt and a bottle of good Bordeaux and 30 years of practicing that smile were enough to make him invisible. He forgot about the quiet one. He forgot about Jade. This story was written for the women who stayed quiet for too long, and for the daughters who didn't. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.